Hello everybody, it's Jessica, and this is officially my second Regret Me Not Project dashboard confessional. And same caveats as last time, I have to pay attention to both the road and the camera, so excuse me if my eyes go back and forth a little bit as I try to pay attention to doing things like changing lanes. So anyway, I'm going to make this video a little bit shorter than the last one, which was a little bit too long. So anyway, this dashboard confessional is about improv class, and I just had my first improv class on Monday, and I have to say that I was scared to death of going to improv class. I was more scared of going to improv class than pretty much anything else that I think I've done recently. And when I thought about what I wanted to do in this Regret Me Not project, improv class was one of the first things that came to my mind. And a lot of that stems from what a lot of you may know about me already, which is that for pretty much my entire life, I hated public speaking. And in fact, I didn't even really like speaking to people all that much in general. Like, I really didn't like having to order in a restaurant, and I really didn't like having to make phone calls. And I would actually look for classes in college that had no class participation grade because I really didn't want to have to speak in front of the class. And I don't know what the deal was with that. I had a perfectly easy time doing things like doing a dance performance in front of a whole bunch of people, but I just couldn't bring myself to be at ease in speaking in front of people. So improv class for me is kind of an extension of the transformation that I've already gone through with all of that. But a lot of the things that I've gotten comfortable with in terms of interacting with people are things that are either scripted or they're a conversation, like a business conversation, where technically it's not scripted. I don't have notes in front of me, but I know my material really well, so I'm not just doing something off the cuff. And even having conversations with people in general about like what's going on in my life or whatever, that kind of stuff is pretty easy to talk about because you're basically telling a story about yourself. So I wanted to push it a step further, and I also am totally open and will readily admit that like one of the other things that I really wanted to work on is that like I know that I'm not the funniest person on the planet. I can sometimes say things that are pretty funny, but I also know that I'm the kind of person that like, yeah, sometimes when somebody says something that really deserves a witty response, I got nothing. I'm that person sort of sitting there like not being able to say anything, and I really don't want to be that person anymore. I really want to be able to have those humorous conversations with people and take that level of conversation up to that next category of really feeling like I'm interacting with people in a way that like makes me happy. I mean, I do that already, but anyway, so improv class totally kicked ass. It was awesome. I was still scared for the entire class, and it was this weird combination of being completely scared and yet completely enjoying myself at the same time, and like just being totally excited to be there. And I'm already excited to go back again next week. I'm not dreading it, but I know I'm going to be nervous. And what was crazy is that it wasn't that bad. I kind of thought I was going to be awful. And I really wasn't as bad as I thought, which I think, says something about oftentimes the anxiety that we have about something is really misplaced, that we're projecting that things are going to be worse than they actually are. So I just wanted to touch on one thing, and I'm probably going to talk about improv a lot because I think it has so much to offer, and like everybody should take an improv class. But anyway, the big thing that I walked away from with my first class was that improv is actually going to teach me way more than I even thought it was going to. Because we did this exercise in the beginning where we were basically like all just walking around the room for about 15 minutes, and we could walk in any pattern we wanted. And the rules were we basically had to say a little fact about ourselves, a factoid. And when you said the factoid about yourself, you had to stop, and everyone else in the class, there are 15 of us in the class, we all had to stop and listen to the other person's factoid. And then you'd start walking again, and then someone else needed to say a factoid that kind of connected in some way to the first person's factoid. And so, number one, we learned a ton of interesting stuff about each other. But number two, what the second part of that exercise was actually at the end, going back, and the instructor asked each of us to list off 2 factoids and the person who said them. And that was incredibly hard. I mean, the factoids that stood out were like the wild and crazy factoids about some, accident somebody got into while they were doing something really inappropriate and that kind of stuff. But other than that, sometimes it was really hard to remember the factoids. And I think what we all walked away from that exercise with was the idea that we need to listen better. That so much, both in improv and in regular life, we're thinking about, well, what am I going to say next? And we're worried about what we're going to say, what we're going to contribute to the conversation, instead of actually really, truly listening to the other person and internalizing that first and then responding. And so much of improv is really listening to what your partners are saying, because if you don't listen well, you're so much less likely to come up with a humorous response to something. So that was lesson number one. There are a ton more improv lessons. If you've never done improv before, after just 3 hours of improv, I'm a complete convert. So go out and get some improv on.